I never thought I'd be sitting alone in a high school gymnasium 20 years after graduation, but here I am. The reunion ended hours ago. The last car pulled out of the parking lot while I was still inside, wandering the halls like a ghost haunting his own past. Now the building is empty except for me, and the silence feels heavier than the weight of all those years between then and now. The bleachers creak under me as I shift, trying to find a comfortable position on the unforgiving metal. The gymnasium lights flicker once, then settle back into their dim yellow glow. Someone forgot to turn them off, or maybe they left them on for me. Maybe they knew I'd need them. I have my old yearbook open on my lap, turned to a page that should be covered in signatures and inside jokes and promises to stay in touch forever. Instead, it's mostly blank. A few polite messages from classmates I barely knew. Nothing from the people who mattered. Nothing from him. My wedding ring catches the light as I turn the page. I've been twisting it without thinking, the way I do when I'm nervous or guilty, or both. The gold band feels heavier tonight than it has in years. Audrey would ask why I'm still here if she knew. She'd ask why I didn't come home for dinner, why I'm sitting in an empty school building staring at pictures of teenagers who don't exist anymore. But I can't explain to her what I'm looking for in these pages. I can't tell her that I've been searching for proof that what I remember actually happened. That those moments of almost connection, those long silences that felt like conversations, those times when our shoulders touched and neither of us pulled away. That all of it was real and not just the desperate imagination of a boy who didn't understand what he was feeling. The gymnasium door opens behind me with a soft squeak of hinges. I don't turn around. I know who it is before I hear the footsteps crossing the polished floor. There's something about the way he moves that I recognize in my bones, even after all these years. The same careful, deliberate pace. The same weight to his steps. Malcolm sits down beside me without a word. Just like he used to. Just like he always did. His knee is close enough to mine that I can feel the warmth of him through the fabric of his jeans. Close enough that if I shifted just slightly, we'd be touching. He doesn't ask why I'm here. Doesn't make small talk about the reunion or comment on how strange it is to be back in this place where we spent so many afternoons together. He just sits, and somehow that's exactly what I need. The silence stretches between us like a bridge I'm afraid to cross. I can hear my own breathing, can hear the distant hum of the vending machine in the hallway, can hear the past echoing in the rafters above us. All those basketball games we attended together, sitting in these same bleachers, pretending to watch the game while stealing glances at each other. I close the yearbook and set it aside. My hands are shaking slightly, and I hope he doesn't notice. I hope he doesn't see how much this moment is costing me. How much courage it took just to stay here, just to wait for him to find me. Then he says my name. Not loud. Barely a whisper. But it lands in the space between us like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples through everything I thought I knew about leaving the past behind. Julian. It's not a greeting. It's not a question. It's something else entirely. Something that sounds like recognition. Like relief. Like a prayer he's been holding in his chest for 20 years, finally set free. I turn to look at him then, and his eyes are exactly the same as they were when we were 18. The same brown eyes that used to find mine across crowded hallways. The same eyes that watched me when he thought I wasn't looking. The same eyes that held secrets I was too afraid to ask about. The gymnasium lights flicker again, and for just a moment, we're 17 again. For just a moment, all the careful distance I've put between myself and this feeling collapses like a house of cards. For just a moment, I remember what it was like to sit next to him in comfortable silence, knowing that somehow, despite everything I couldn't say, he understood. The fluorescent bulbs steady themselves, and the moment passes. But something has shifted. Something has begun. And I know, sitting here in this empty gymnasium at dusk, that I'm not going to be able to walk away from it this time. Not like I did before. Not like I've been doing for the past 20 years. Malcolm is still looking at me, waiting. And for the first time in decades, I don't know what comes next. But I know I want to find out. The drive home from the reunion takes 43 minutes. I know because I've timed it before, during other late nights when sleep wouldn't come, and I found myself driving past the old school, never stopping, never going inside. Just driving by like a man checking on a house he used to live in, making sure it's still there, making sure it's still real. My house sits at the end of a cul-de-sac in West Hartford, Connecticut. Colonial style, white shutters, a mailbox that Audrey painted last spring in a shade of blue she called Coastal Morning. The kind of house that appears in real estate brochures under the heading "Perfect for Growing Families." We bought it 12 years ago when Fiona was 6 and still believed that her parents were happy together. I pull into the driveway and sit for a moment before turning off the engine. The house is dark except for the porch light Audrey always leaves on for me. A small kindness that somehow makes everything worse. Through the kitchen window, I can see the outline of tomorrow's coffee pot, already programmed and ready. The breakfast dishes from this morning are probably still in the drying rack, arranged in the precise order Audrey prefers. The hiss of blank tape. I'm about to ask Malcolm what I'm supposed to be listening for when I hear it. My own voice, barely a whisper, saying something I don't remember saying. I wish I could tell you, Julian. I really do. The words hit me like a physical blow. I can hear the longing in my teenage voice, the weight of everything I couldn't say, the pain of carrying a secret that felt too big for my 17-year-old heart to hold. I can hear myself on the verge of confession, on the edge of truth, speaking to someone I thought couldn't hear me. But Malcolm did hear me. He heard me, and he's been carrying those words around for 20 years, wondering what I meant, wondering what I would have told him if I'd been brave enough to continue. I ask him why he never said anything, why he never asked me about it. He tells me he was too scared, too worried that pushing for an answer would ruin whatever we had. He tells me he convinced himself that maybe he'd misheard. Maybe it wasn't as significant as it seemed. Maybe I was talking about something else entirely. But sitting here beside this waterfall, listening to my own voice confess something I didn't even know I was confessing, I realized that some truths are too big to stay buried forever. Some feelings are too persistent to ignore, no matter how much time passes or how many reasons you find to deny them. I tell him what I would have said that day if I'd been brave enough to continue. I tell him I would have said I loved him, that I'd been dreaming about him, that I spent half my time wondering what it would be like to kiss him, and the other half feeling guilty for wanting something I thought was wrong. I tell him I would have said I was terrified of graduation because it meant losing him, losing the only person who made me feel like myself, losing the only relationship that felt real in a world where everything else felt like pretending. Malcolm listens without interrupting, and when I finish talking, he's quiet for a long time. Then he tells me something that changes everything. He tells me he would have said yes. He tells me he would have said he felt the same way, that he'd been waiting for me to say something first because he was too scared to risk our friendship on something that might have been one-sided. He tells me about the nights he spent lying awake, wondering if the way I looked at him meant what he hoped it meant. He tells me about the times he almost reached for my hand, almost leaned in for a kiss, almost crossed the line from friendship into something deeper. The revelation sits between us like a bridge we're both afraid to cross. 20 years of what-ifs, 20 years of parallel longing, 20 years of loving each other from a distance without ever knowing the feeling was mutual. I ask him what this means for us now. I ask him if we're still just catching up as old friends, or if we're acknowledging something bigger, something that's going to require choices and consequences and admissions that can't be taken back. He doesn't answer with words. Instead, he reaches over and touches my face, his palm warm against my cheek, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw like he's memorizing the shape of me. The gesture is so gentle, so careful, so full of 20 years of restrained wanting that I feel something break open in my chest. I lean into his touch, and for a moment we just sit like that, forehead to forehead, breathing the same air, finally allowing ourselves to acknowledge what we've both been feeling since we were teenagers. Then he kisses me. It's nothing like the dramatic first kisses in movies, nothing like the passionate embraces I've imagined in the rare moments when I've allowed myself to imagine this at all. It's soft and tentative and questioning, like he's asking permission even as he's taking it. But it's also everything I've been waiting for without knowing I was waiting. It's the answer to questions I didn't know how to ask, the completion of conversations we started 20 years ago and never finished. It's coming home to a place I didn't know existed. When we break apart, I'm crying. Not from sadness, but from relief, from the overwhelming intensity of finally feeling something real after so many years of careful numbness. Malcolm wipes the tears from my face with his thumbs, and I can see that his eyes are bright too, that this moment is as overwhelming for him as it is for me. We don't talk about what happens next. We don't make plans or promises or declarations about what this means for our lives outside this perfect, isolated moment. We just sit beside the waterfall, holding each other, letting ourselves feel the full weight of 20 years of love that's finally been acknowledged. The drive back to town is quiet, but it's a different kind of quiet than before. It's the silence of two people who have finally said what needed to be said, who have finally crossed a line they've been standing at for most of their adult lives. Malcolm reaches over and takes my hand as we navigate the winding roads down from the hills, and I don't pull away. When we reach the coffee shop where I left my car, neither of us wants to say goodbye. We sit in his truck for a long time, hands clasped, watching other people go about their ordinary Thursday afternoon business. A woman with two children buying ice cream. An elderly couple sharing a newspaper on a bench. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that the world has just shifted on its axis for two men sitting in a pickup truck in a small-town parking lot. Finally, Malcolm asks if I'm okay. He asks if I regret what happened, if I'm going to go home and convince myself it was a mistake, if I'm going to disappear back into my carefully constructed life and pretend this never happened. I tell him I'm not okay, but not in the way he's worried about. I tell him I feel more myself than I've felt in 20 years, and that's terrifying because I don't know how to be this person in the life I've built. I tell him I don't regret what happened, but I'm scared of what it means, scared of what I'm going to have to face when I go home to my wife and my normal life and all the responsibilities I can't just abandon. He tells me he understands. He tells me he's not asking me to make any dramatic changes, not asking me to blow up my life or make promises I can't keep. He's just asking if we can keep being honest with each other, keep exploring what this is, keep allowing ourselves to feel what we've been denying for so long. We make plans to meet again the following week, same time, same place. But we both know that next Thursday is going to be different, that we've crossed into territory we can't pretend doesn't exist anymore. I drive home in a daze, my lips still tingling from his kiss, my hands still warm from his touch. Every song on the radio seems to be about love or longing or finding yourself in someone else. Every mile I put between myself and Malcolm feels like moving away from the person I really am and back toward the person I've been pretending to be. When I pull into my driveway, I sit in my car for a few minutes, trying to arrange my face into something that won't give me away. I check my reflection in the rearview mirror, looking for evidence of what happened, for signs that I've been fundamentally changed by a kiss beside a waterfall in the woods. But I look the same as always. Same graying hair, same tired eyes, same face that's learned to hide what it's really feeling. The transformation has happened on the inside, in places that don't show, in the part of me that's been waiting 20 years to come alive. Audrey is in the kitchen when I come in, preparing dinner like she does every Thursday, following the same routine we've established over years of marriage. She looks up and smiles when I enter, asks how my coffee with Malcolm was, if we had a good time catching up. The ease with which she accepts my Thursday absences makes the deception worse somehow. She trusts me completely, assumes that my old friend and I are just enjoying harmless nostalgia, never imagining that her husband has been falling in love with someone who isn't her. I tell her we had a good time, that we drove up to see a waterfall, that it was nice to get out of the city for a while. All of this is technically true, but it's also the most significant lie I've ever told, the kind of omission that changes everything even when it sounds like nothing. She tells me about her day, about the book club meeting she attended, about the volunteer work she's considering at the church. I listen and nod and make the appropriate responses, but I feel like I'm watching our conversation from outside my body, like I'm observing someone else's life instead of living my own. That night at dinner, I catch myself studying Audrey's face, trying to remember when I stopped really seeing her as a person instead of just a component of the life I built. She's still beautiful, still kind, still everything a reasonable man should want in a wife. But sitting across from her at our familiar table, I realize that what I feel for her isn't love so much as affection, gratitude, the comfortable attachment that comes from sharing a life with someone without ever really sharing yourself. She deserves better than that. She deserves someone who looks at her the way Malcolm looked at me this afternoon, someone who touches her like she's precious, someone who chooses her not because she's safe and appropriate, but because she's essential, irreplaceable. The only person who makes him feel complete. Later, lying in bed beside her, listening to her breathing slow into sleep, I replay every moment of the afternoon. Malcolm's hand on my face, the way he said my name before he kissed me, the feeling of finally being exactly where I belonged. I think about the cassette tape, about my 17-year-old voice whispering secrets I thought no one could hear. I think about all the years Malcolm and I spent loving each other in silence, all the time we wasted being afraid of what we wanted, all the chances we missed to be brave enough to reach for something real. I think about Audrey, sleeping peacefully beside me, trusting that the man she married is the man she thinks she knows. I think about Fiona, away at college, building her own life based partly on the example her parents have set. I think about the carefully constructed world I've built, all the people who depend on me to keep being the person I've always been. But I also think about Malcolm's mouth on mine, about the way 20 years collapsed into nothing the moment we finally stopped pretending. I think about the person I become when I'm with him, the person I used to be before I learned to be afraid of what I wanted. I know I'm standing at a crossroads. I know that continuing to see Malcolm, continuing to explore what's happening between us, is going to require choices I'm not sure I'm ready to make. I know that loving him the way I want to love him is going to mean hurting people I care about, destroying the stability I've spent so long creating. But I also know I can't go back to pretending. I can't go back to the careful numbness I've been calling contentment. I can't go back to living someone else's idea of what my life should look like instead of building the life I actually want. Tomorrow, I'll teach my classes and grade papers and maintain the facade of normalcy. Tomorrow, I'll be Mr. Castellano the teacher, Julian the husband, Julian the father. Tomorrow, I'll play all the roles I've been playing for 20 years. But underneath all that performance, I'll be counting the days until Thursday, until I can see Malcolm again, until I can be the person I really am instead of the person I think I should be. For the first time in my adult life, that person feels worth fighting for. For the first time in 20 years, I feel like I have something worth risking everything to keep. The question isn't whether I love Malcolm. The question is whether I'm brave enough to choose that love over everything else I've built my life around. Whether I'm ready to stop being safe and start being honest. As I finally drift off to sleep, Audrey's wedding ring catches the moonlight on the nightstand beside her. Tomorrow I'll have to decide whether I'm ready to find out. 3 more weeks pass in this strange double life I've created, where Thursday afternoons belong to Malcolm and the rest of my time belongs to the careful performance I call my marriage. 3 weeks of stolen kisses in his truck, of long conversations that stretch far beyond coffee shop closing times, of feeling more alive than I have in decades while simultaneously feeling like I'm slowly suffocating in my own home. Malcolm and I have found our rhythm now, a delicate dance of intimacy and restraint that acknowledges what we are without demanding what we can't yet give. We hold hands when we walk through secluded parts of the state park. We kiss goodbye in empty parking lots where no one knows our names. We say I love you in whispers, like the words are too precious and too dangerous to speak at full volume. But the weight of secrecy is starting to take its toll. I find myself distracted at work, losing my train of thought in the middle of lessons, staring out the window when I should be grading papers. My students notice. They ask if I'm feeling okay, if something's wrong, if I need them to repeat questions I haven't heard. I reassure them with the same careful smile I've been using at home, but I can see they're not entirely convinced. At home, the strain is even more obvious. I catch Audrey watching me sometimes, a puzzled expression on her face like she's trying to solve an equation that doesn't quite balance. I've been coming home later on Thursdays, staying out longer with excuses about traffic or errands that need running. I've been more careful about my appearance before I leave, checking myself in mirrors more often, making sure I look like someone worth loving. She hasn't asked direct questions yet, but I can feel them building. I can see her noticing the way I check my phone constantly, the way I smile at texts I don't explain, the way I seem to be living more in my head than in our shared space. She's not stupid, and I'm not as good at hiding as I think I am. The breaking point comes on a Wednesday evening in late November. I'm sitting at the kitchen table grading papers when my phone buzzes with a text from Malcolm. It's a photo of the sunset from his apartment window, with a message that says, "Thinking of you." Simple words, innocent enough to anyone who might see them, but loaded with the weight of everything we've been feeling for each other. I must smile because Audrey looks up from her book and asks who texted me. I tell her it's just Malcolm, an old friend from high school that I've been catching up with. The truth, but not the whole truth, and we both know it. She asks how often we talk, this old friend and I. I tell her not that often, just occasionally. Another partial truth that feels like a complete lie. She nods and goes back to her book, but I can feel the question she's not asking hanging in the air between us. That night, lying in bed beside her, I make a decision that I know is either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. I decide I can't keep living this double life. I can't keep lying to Audrey, even if the lies are mostly omissions. I can't keep pretending that what I feel for Malcolm is just friendship, just nostalgia, just a harmless connection to my past. I decide to invite Malcolm to dinner. At our house. With Audrey. Not because I want to hurt her, but because I need her to see what I can't bring myself to tell her. I need her to witness the way Malcolm and I look at each other, the way we move around each other, the way our connection fills up a room even when we're trying to hide it. It's cowardly, maybe. Using Malcolm's presence to communicate what I don't have the courage to say directly. But it's also honest in a way I haven't been in months. It's forcing the truth into the open instead of letting it fester in the shadows of Thursday afternoons and secret text messages. I call Malcolm the next morning from my classroom during my planning period. When I tell him what I'm thinking, there's a long silence on the other end of the line. Then he asks if I'm sure, if I've really thought this through, if I understand what I'm asking of him. I tell him I'm not sure of anything except that I can't keep living this way. I can't keep compartmentalizing my life. Can't keep pretending that loving him is something I only do in private. I tell him I need Audrey to see us together, not because I want to hurt her, but because she deserves to know who her husband really is. Malcolm is quiet for another moment, then tells me he'll come. He tells me he's been waiting for me to be ready to stop hiding, and if this is how I need to do it, he'll support me. He tells me he loves me, and that he trusts me to handle this in whatever way feels right. We set the date for the following Saturday. I tell Audrey that evening, casually mentioning that I've invited my old friend Malcolm for dinner, that I thought it would be nice for her to meet someone who was important to me in high school. She seems pleased by this, like it's evidence that I'm finally opening up to her about my past, finally letting her into parts of my life I've kept separate. If only she knew. The week leading up to the dinner passes in a blur of anxiety and second-guessing. I clean the house obsessively, rearrange furniture that doesn't need rearranging, plan a menu that's more elaborate than anything I usually cook. Audrey watches all this preparation with amusement, teasing me about being nervous to introduce an old friend, not realizing that I'm not nervous about the introduction so much as I'm terrified about the revelation. Malcolm and I don't see each other that Thursday. We both agree that we need some space before Saturday, some time to prepare for what's going to happen when we're all in the same room together. Instead, we text constantly, checking in with each other, offering reassurance and support for what we both know is going to be a difficult evening. Saturday arrives gray and cold, with the kind of November rain that makes everything look bleak and unforgiving. I spend the morning cooking, grateful for tasks that keep my hands busy and my mind focused on something other than what's coming. Audrey helps, humming while she sets the table, clearly looking forward to meeting this mysterious old friend I've been spending time with. The irony is almost unbearable. She's excited to meet Malcolm because she thinks it means I'm finally letting her into my world, finally sharing parts of myself I've kept hidden. She has no idea that meeting Malcolm is going to show her exactly how much I've been hiding, how much of myself she's never really known. Malcolm arrives at 6, punctual as always, carrying flowers for Audrey and a bottle of wine that's nicer than anything we usually drink. He's dressed carefully but not formally, in dark jeans and a burgundy sweater that brings out his eyes. He looks handsome and nervous and completely out of place in my suburban kitchen, like a wild animal that's agreed to be domesticated for one evening. I introduce them, watching Audrey's face as she shakes Malcolm's hand, seeing her take in his appearance, his manner, the way he looks at me when he thinks she's not watching. She's gracious and welcoming, asking about his work, his family, how long it's been since we've seen each other. Normal hostess questions that Malcolm answers with careful politeness. But I can see her noticing things. The way Malcolm knows where I keep the wine glasses without being told. The way he moves around our kitchen like he's been here before, even though this is his first time in our house. The way his eyes follow me as I finish preparing dinner. The way he seems more interested in watching me work than in making conversation with her. We sit down to eat, and I realize immediately that this was a mistake. The three of us around our small dining room table feels wrong in every possible way. Malcolm and I can't look at each other without giving ourselves away, but avoiding eye contact feels equally suspicious. Audrey keeps trying to draw Malcolm into conversation about our high school years, asking about classes we took together, friends we had in common, memories that might explain why we've reconnected after so many years. Malcolm handles her questions well, but I can see the strain in his posture, the careful way he chooses his words. He tells stories about our teenage selves that are true but sanitized, edited versions that leave out all the longing and confusion and almost moments that actually defined our friendship. He makes us sound like normal teenage boys who happen to be close friends, nothing more complicated than that. But Audrey is smart, and she's been married to me for 16 years. She knows when something doesn't quite add up. I can see her taking mental notes, filing away the little inconsistencies, the moments when Malcolm's stories don't quite match the energy between us in the present moment. The real problem comes during dessert. Malcolm is telling a story about a camping trip we took senior year, and without thinking, he mentions something about me keeping him warm when the temperature dropped unexpectedly. It's an innocent comment, the kind of thing one friend might say about another, but the way he says it, the way his voice softens on the word warm, the way he looks at me when he says it, makes it clear that keeping warm wasn't the only thing that happened in that tent. Audrey catches it immediately. I see her posture change, see the hostess smile falter for just a moment before she recovers. She asks a follow-up question about the camping trip, something innocuous about where we went, but her tone has shifted. She's not making conversation anymore. She's investigating. Malcolm realizes his mistake as soon as the words are out of his mouth. He tries to backtrack, to make the comment sound more casual, but it's too late. The truth is sitting at our dinner table now, uninvited but undeniable. The truth about what we were to each other then, what we are to each other now, what this dinner really means. We finish dessert in relative silence, with Audrey asking fewer questions and Malcolm offering fewer stories. I clear the table and serve coffee, going through the motions of hospitality while my heart pounds so hard I'm sure they can both hear it. Malcolm leaves at 9, thanking Audrey for dinner, shaking her hand politely, giving me a careful pat on the shoulder that probably looks casual to her but feels like goodbye to me. I walk into his truck while Audrey starts cleaning up inside, and we don't say much, just exchange a look that acknowledges how badly this evening is gone, how exposed we both feel, how much we probably just destroyed. When I come back inside, Audrey is loading the dishwasher with mechanical precision, her movements sharp and efficient in a way that tells me she's angry or hurt or both. I offer to help, but she waves me away, tells me she's got it under control. Her voice is carefully neutral, the tone she uses when she's trying not to start a fight she's not ready to have. We go through our normal evening routine without discussing what just happened. We watch the news, brush our teeth, get ready for bed like this is any other Saturday night. But the air between us is thick with unspoken questions, with observations she's made but isn't ready to voice, with truths I need to tell but don't know how to begin. Finally, when we're both in bed with the lights out, she breaks the silence. She asks if there's something I need to tell her. Not about Malcolm specifically, not about what she observed tonight, just a general question that gives me space to confess whatever I'm ready to confess. I lie there in the dark, listening to her breathing, feeling the weight of 16 years of marriage and 18 years of parenthood and 38 years of trying to be the person I thought I was supposed to be. I think about Malcolm driving home alone, probably wondering if I'm going to retreat back into my closeted life now that the secret is partially out. I think about Audrey lying beside me, knowing something is wrong but not knowing what, trusting me to be honest even though I've been lying by omission for months. I tell her yes. I tell her there is something I need to tell her, something I should have told her a long time ago, something I'm only now beginning to understand myself. And then I tell her about Malcolm. Not everything, not all at once, but enough. I tell her about reconnecting with him at the reunion, about the feelings I had for him in high school that I buried and denied and tried to outgrow. I tell her about the Thursday coffee meetings, about the gradual realization that what I felt for him then is still there, still strong, still something I can't ignore anymore. I don't tell her about the kisses, about the declarations of love, about the afternoon spent planning a future that would somehow include both of them. I tell her enough to explain tonight's dinner, enough to explain why I've been distant and distracted, enough to begin the conversation we need to have about who I really am and what I really want. She listens without interrupting, and when I finish talking, she's quiet for a long time. I can hear her thinking, processing, trying to figure out how this information fits with the man she thought she married, the life she thought we were building together. Finally, she asks if I'm in love with him. The question hangs in the air between us, simple and devastating, the one thing I can't deflect or minimize or explain away. I tell her yes. I tell her I think I've been in love with him since I was 17, that I spent 20 years trying to convince myself that what I felt was just friendship, just nostalgia, just something I could overcome through willpower and commitment to the life I thought I should want. She asks if I'm in love with her. Another simple question, another moment of truth I can't avoid. I tell her I love her, that I care about her deeply, that she's been a good wife and a wonderful mother, and that I've tried my best to be a good husband to her. But I also tell her that what I feel for Malcolm is different, deeper, more essential to who I am. I tell her that being with him feels like coming home to myself in a way that being with her, no matter how much I care about her, never has. The silence that follows this admission feels endless. I can hear the house settling around us, the heat clicking on, the sound of a neighbor's dog barking in the distance. Normal sounds of suburban life continuing while my marriage ends in the dark. When Audrey finally speaks, her voice is smaller than I've ever heard it. She asks how long this has been going on, how long I've been lying to her, how long I've been living a double life. I tell her about the Thursday meetings, about the gradual progression from friendship to something more, about the growing certainty that I can't keep pretending to be someone I'm not. I tell her that I never meant to hurt her, never wanted this to happen, but that I can't go back to the way things were before Malcolm came back into my life. She asks if I want a divorce. Direct, practical, cutting straight to the heart of what this conversation means for our future. I tell her I don't know. I tell her I need time to figure out what comes next, how to be honest about who I am without destroying everything we've built together. I tell her that what I want more than anything is to stop lying, to stop pretending, to find a way to live authentically that doesn't require choosing between my family and my happiness. But even as I say it, I know how naive that sounds. I know that some choices can't be avoided, some bridges can't be half-crossed. I know that wanting to have everything is different from being able to have everything. Audrey gets out of bed without saying anything else. I hear her moving around in the dark, gathering things from her dresser, from the closet. I ask where she's going, and she tells me she's going to sleep in the guest room, that she needs space to think, that she can't lie next to me tonight knowing what she knows now. I want to follow her, to keep talking, to try to explain or comfort or somehow make this easier for both of us. But I also know that this conversation has been enough honesty for one night, that pushing for more right now would be cruel. I lie awake for hours after she leaves, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of her moving around in the guest room, trying to process what I've just done. I've told my wife I'm in love with another man. I've admitted that our marriage has been built on a fundamental lie about who I am. I've opened a door that can't be closed, started a conversation that can only end one way. But I've also finally told the truth. For the first time in my adult life, I've been completely honest about what I want and who I am. It's terrifying and liberating and devastating all at the same time. In the morning, I wake up alone in our bed, and I can hear Audrey moving around downstairs, making coffee, starting her day. When I go down to the kitchen, she's sitting at the table with a cup of coffee and the Sunday paper, dressed and composed like any other weekend morning. But her wedding ring is sitting in the small ceramic dish beside the sink, the one where we usually keep loose change and paper clips and the other small debris of daily life. She's not wearing it anymore, and the absence of that thin gold band changes everything about how she looks, how she moves, how she belongs in this space we've shared for so many years. She looks up when I come in, and her eyes are red but clear. She tells me she's been thinking all night about what I said, about what it means for us, for Fiona, for the life we've built together. She tells me she's not angry, which surprises me. She tells me she's hurt and confused and scared about what comes next, but that she's not angry because she can see that I've been suffering too, that living a lie has been as hard on me as discovering it has been on her. She tells me she needs time to figure out what she wants, how she wants to handle this, what kind of future she can imagine for herself. She tells me she's going to visit her sister in Maine for a few days, that she needs space away from this house, away from me, away from the weight of trying to process this while maintaining the appearance of normalcy. I tell her I understand. I tell her I'm sorry for putting her in this position, sorry for not being honest sooner, sorry for building our marriage on a foundation that was never as solid as either of us thought. She nods and finishes her coffee, then goes upstairs to pack. I hear her moving around our bedroom, gathering clothes and toiletries, preparing for a departure that feels both temporary and permanent. When she comes back downstairs with her suitcase, she stops in the kitchen doorway and looks at me for a long moment. Then she tells me that when she comes back, we're going to have to make some decisions. Real decisions about what comes next, about whether this marriage can survive the truth, about how to tell Fiona and our families and everyone else who thinks they know who we are. She tells me to think about what I really want while she's gone. Not what I think I should want, not what would be easiest or safest or most conventional, but what I actually want. She tells me that whatever I decide, she deserves honesty from this point forward, complete honesty about who I am and what I need and whether I can be the husband she deserves. I tell her I will. I promise her complete honesty, even though I'm not sure either of us is ready for what that's going to look like. She leaves without kissing me goodbye, and I stand at the kitchen window watching her drive away, carrying our marriage and our future in the trunk of her car along with her suitcase. The house feels impossibly quiet after she's gone. I walk through the rooms we've shared for 12 years, looking at the evidence of our life together. Wedding photos, family vacations, Fiona's artwork from elementary school still hanging on the refrigerator even though she's in college now. All the accumulation of a shared life that suddenly feels like artifacts from someone else's story. I call Malcolm from my cell phone, something I've never done from inside this house before. When he answers, I tell him what happened, about the conversation with Audrey, about her leaving, about the choice I'm finally being forced to make. He listens without judgment, without pressure, without trying to influence my decision one way or another. When I finish talking, he tells me he loves me, that he'll support whatever choice I make, that he's not going anywhere regardless of what I decide. But he also tells me something else. He tells me that he can't keep being a secret, can't keep being the person I see only on Thursday afternoons, can't keep loving someone who isn't sure he's worth choosing. He tells me he needs to know, when Audrey comes back, when we have the conversation that's going to determine our future, whether I'm ready to choose authenticity over security, love over convention, the person I really am over the person I think I should be. It's not an ultimatum, exactly. It's just honesty. The same complete honesty I promised Audrey, the same truth-telling that got us to this moment in the first place. After we hang up, I sit in my empty house and try to imagine what comes next. I tried to imagine telling Audrey I want a divorce, telling Fiona that her parents are splitting up, telling my colleagues and neighbors and church community that the life I've been living has been a performance, that the man they thought they knew has been a carefully constructed fiction. But I also tried to imagine going back to the way things were. Cutting contact with Malcolm, recommitting to my marriage, pretending that these past few months never happened. Going back to the careful numbness I used to call contentment, the performance I used to call love. And I realize that's not a choice anymore. I can't unknow what I know about myself. I can't unfeel what I felt with Malcolm. I can't go back to sleepwalking through my life, satisfied with less than what I want, afraid to reach for what I need. The only question left is whether I'm brave enough to choose the life I want over the life I've built. Whether I'm ready to hurt people I care about in order to stop lying to them. Whether I'm strong enough to face the consequences of finally, completely, honestly being myself. Audrey will be back in a few days, and when she is, I'll have to give her an answer. I'll have to tell her what I've decided, what I want, who I choose to be going forward. For the first time in my life, I think I know what that answer is going to be. 8 months later, I'm sitting at the same kitchen table, but everything else has changed. The house is smaller now, a 2-bedroom cottage I'm renting on the other side of town. The kitchen table is secondhand, mismatched chairs I found at an estate sale. The coffee mug in my hands has a chip in the handle, and the morning light streams through windows that face east instead of west, casting unfamiliar shadows across a life I'm still learning how to live. Malcolm is upstairs, still asleep. I can hear the old pipes creaking as the house settles, sounds I'm getting used to after 3 months of living together. It's Saturday morning, early enough that the neighborhood is quiet, late enough that I should probably start thinking about breakfast. But I'm content to sit here with my coffee, watching the sunrise, writing a letter I'll never send. The letter is to Audrey. I write one every few weeks, usually on weekend mornings when the house is peaceful and I have space to think clearly. I never send them, but writing them helps me process what's happened, helps me understand the choice I made and continue to make every day. Today's letter starts the way they all do, with an apology. I'm sorry for the pain I caused her, sorry for the years of dishonesty, sorry for building our marriage on a foundation that was never as solid as either of us believed. I'm sorry for the way it ended, with that terrible dinner party and the conversation that followed. with her having to discover my truth instead of being trusted with it from the beginning. But I'm not sorry for the choice I made. I'm not sorry for choosing authenticity over safety, love over convention, the life I wanted over the life I thought I should want. I'm not sorry for finally being brave enough to live as myself instead of as the carefully constructed person I spent 38 years pretending to be. The divorce was finalized 2 months ago. Audrey handled it with the same quiet dignity she brought to everything else, working with lawyers to divide our assets fairly, selling the house we'd shared for 12 years, making practical decisions about custody and finances and all the mundane details that come with dismantling a life. Fiona took it harder than either of us expected. She's 20 now, old enough to understand that her parents' divorce isn't her fault, but young enough to feel like her entire understanding of her family has shifted beneath her feet. She spent winter break at Audrey's new apartment in Maine, and I could see in her careful politeness during our phone calls that she was struggling to reconcile the father she'd always known with the man I'd revealed myself to be. But she's coming around. Last month she visited for the first time, staying for a weekend in the cottage, meeting Malcolm properly instead of as just Dad's old friend from high school. She was nervous at first, unsure how to navigate this new configuration of her family, but Malcolm won her over the way he wins everyone over, with his quiet kindness and genuine interest in who she is rather than who she's supposed to be. The three of us cooked dinner together that first night, and I watched Fiona observing Malcolm and me, seeing how we moved around each other in the kitchen, how we communicated without words, how natural our partnership had become. I could see her understanding, maybe for the first time, that this wasn't a midlife crisis or a phase or a selfish whim. This was love. Real love, the kind she'd never actually seen between her parents despite our 16 years of marriage. When she left, she hugged Malcolm goodbye, and I saw something in her expression that looked like relief. Not relief that her parents had divorced, but relief that her father was finally happy, finally himself, finally living authentically instead of performing happiness for everyone else's benefit. The church was harder to navigate. I stopped attending St. Margaret's after the separation, unable to face the questions and the sympathy and the well-meaning advice about reconciliation and forgiveness and working things out. Some of my colleagues from the prep school reached out, offering support that felt more like curiosity, wanting to understand how a man they'd known for 15 years had suddenly revealed himself to be someone completely different. I changed schools at the end of the academic year, taking a position at a public high school in the next town over. Starting fresh felt necessary, building new professional relationships with people who knew me as I am rather than as who I used to pretend to be. The pay is less, the classes are larger, but I find myself caring about my students in a way I hadn't in years. Teaching them poetry feels meaningful again, helping them understand that literature is about truth-telling, about finding language for experiences that feel too big for words. Malcolm and I didn't rush into living together. After Audrey came back from Maine and we had the conversation that officially ended my marriage, we continued meeting on Thursdays for 2 months, taking things slowly while I navigated the divorce proceedings and figured out what single life looked like after 16 years of marriage. But gradually, those Thursday meetings stretched longer, became weekend visits, became him keeping clothes at my temporary apartment, became me spending nights at his place above the bakery. The progression felt natural, inevitable, like we were finally allowing ourselves to have what we'd been wanting since we were teenagers. Moving in together felt like coming home, not just to Malcolm, but to myself. The person I am when I'm with him is the person I've always been underneath the careful construction, the performance, the decades of trying to be who I thought I was supposed to be. We have routines now. Saturday morning coffee while I write letters I don't send. Sunday afternoon walks through different neighborhoods, exploring the town we've both lived near but never really seen together. Wednesday evening grocery shopping, something that should be mundane but feels like an affirmation every time, evidence that we're building a life together, that this love is strong enough to include ordinary tasks and everyday decisions. The physical intimacy took time to develop. 20 years of repression doesn't disappear overnight, and learning to be comfortable in my own skin, comfortable with desire, comfortable with receiving and giving love without shame, has been its own kind of education. But Malcolm is patient, understanding, as generous with his body as he is with his heart. Every touch feels like a small miracle, every kiss like proof that authenticity is worth whatever it costs. We talk about the future sometimes, carefully, without making assumptions about what the other person wants or needs. Malcolm mentions maybe buying a house together, something with a yard where we could plant a garden, somewhere that feels permanently ours rather than temporarily borrowed. I mentioned maybe going back to school, getting the advanced degree I always thought about but never pursued when I was younger and more afraid of taking risks. Neither of us talks about marriage exactly, though we both know that's not really an option in Connecticut anyway. But we do talk about commitment, about choosing each other every day, about building something together that's based on honesty rather than convention, love rather than expectation. Audrey sends postcards sometimes. Never letters, never anything that requires a response, just small acknowledgments that she's thinking of me, that she's building her own new life in Maine. The postcards show lighthouses and ocean views in small coastal towns that look peaceful and healing. She's working at a bookstore now, something she always talked about wanting to do but never had the chance when she was busy being a faculty wife and full-time mother. I'm happy for her. It sounds strange to say that about your ex-wife, but it's true. She deserves someone who can love her completely, without reservation, without the weight of secrets and shame and fundamental dishonesty about who he is. She deserves someone who chooses her not because she's safe and appropriate, but because she's essential, irreplaceable, the only person who makes him feel complete. That person was never me, and pretending it could be was unfair to both of us. Malcolm comes downstairs as I'm finishing my letter, wearing pajama pants and a t-shirt, his hair sticking up in directions that make him look younger than 39. He pads barefoot to the coffee maker, pours himself a mug, then comes to sit beside me at the table. He asks what I'm writing. I tell him it's another letter to Audrey, another attempt to process what happened, what's happening, what comes next. He reads over my shoulder for a moment, then asks if I'm thinking about actually sending this one. I tell him no, probably not. These letters are more for me than for her, a way of working through the guilt and gratitude and complicated grief that comes with ending one life and beginning another. She doesn't need to hear my processing. She needs space to do her own healing, to build her own new normal without having to manage my feelings about what we've all been through. Malcolm nods and sips his coffee, comfortable with my rituals, understanding that some things need to be written even if they're never read by the person they're addressed to. Outside, the neighborhood is waking up. I can hear lawn mowers starting, children playing in yards, the ordinary sounds of Saturday morning in suburbia. It's not so different from the soundtrack of my old life, the one I shared with Audrey, but my relationship to those sounds has changed. They used to feel like a cage, evidence of the conventional life I was trapped in. Now they feel like background music, pleasant enough but not particularly meaningful, just the sounds of other people living their lives while I live mine. The counter holds evidence of our shared morning routine. 2 coffee mugs, one chipped and one with a faded logo from Malcolm's HVAC company. The remains of breakfast dishes we'll wash together later. A photo of Fiona from her last visit, smiling between Malcolm and me on the front porch of this cottage that's slowly becoming home. And beside the photo, 2 objects that tell the story of how we got here. The cassette tape in its new case, labeled simply Now in Malcolm's careful handwriting. And the old photograph from the reunion invitation, the one that started this whole journey back to each other, back to ourselves. I don't know who sent that photograph, who decided it was time for Malcolm and me to remember what we'd been trying to forget. Maybe it was Jessica from high school, who always seemed to understand things about us that we didn't understand about ourselves. Maybe it was David, who used to document everything with his camera, who might have been holding on to that moment for 20 years waiting for the right time to return it to us. Or maybe it was someone else entirely, someone who saw what we couldn't see then, someone who understood that some loves are too persistent to stay buried forever, someone who believed we deserved the chance to choose authenticity over safety, truth over convention. It doesn't matter who sent it. What matters is that we were both brave enough to respond, brave enough to remember, brave enough to risk everything we'd built for the chance to live honestly. Malcolm reaches over and takes my hand, and I don't pull away. His palm is warm and real against mine, the same hands that fixed my air conditioning last month when the summer heat became unbearable, the same hands that learned every inch of my body with the patience of someone who's waited 20 years for permission to touch. We sit like that in our small kitchen, 2 men in their late 30s who finally figured out how to choose what they wanted over what they thought they should want. The morning light continues to shift and change, painting new patterns on the walls of this house that's slowly becoming home. I finish the letter and fold it carefully, adding it to the stack in the drawer where I keep all the others. Someday I might send one, might find the right words to explain to Audrey that leaving her was the most loving thing I could do for both of us. Someday I might find a way to thank her for the grace she showed in letting me go, for the dignity she brought to the dissolution of our marriage, for the space she gave me to become who I really am. But not today. Today is for sitting with Malcolm in the morning light, for drinking coffee from mismatched mugs, for living the quiet, ordinary, authentic life we've built together one honest day at a time. The wind picks up outside, rustling the trees in our small yard. Malcolm squeezes my hand and asks what I want to do today, what sounds good, how we should spend this Saturday that belongs entirely to us. I look at him, this man I've loved since I was 17, this person who saw me clearly before I could see myself, this brave soul who waited 20 years for me to be ready to choose love over fear. I tell him I don't care what we do as long as we do it together. I tell him every day with him feels like a gift, like proof that it's never too late to choose authenticity, never too late to live the life you actually want instead of the life you think you should want. He smiles, the same smile that made me forget where I was going when we were teenagers, the same smile that brought me back to myself when I thought I was lost forever. Outside, the world continues its ordinary business. But inside this small kitchen, in this life we've built together, everything is exactly as it should be. Honest, real, and finally, completely our own.